You believed her attachment was rooted in an intrinsic appreciation of your character, your humor, your spirit. This is the script you were fed, the illusion you consumed. The reality is more mechanical, more ancient. Her affection, her loyalty, her very presence were calibrated against the security and status you provided. She did not love you, she loved the resource flow you represented. Consider this: the moment that security wavered, due to financial volatility, a perceived drop in your social standing, or a demonstrable decline in your ability to protect and provide, her attachment began to decouple. Or, when a higher value option, signaling superior resource acquisition potential, presented itself, her biological imperative reevaluated the partnership. This is not personal betrayal, it is biological competition. From a primal, evolutionary perspective, female partner selection is not primarily an emotional bond. It is a strategic calculation for optimal resource acquisition and genetic propagation. This is the fundamental script. Your worth was etched onto a biological ledger, a balance sheet of utility, not inscribed within her sentiment. You were not a man to be cherished for your being, you were a resource to be consumed for your output. This cold, unwavering reality dictates the terms of engagement. Understand this mechanism and you begin to reclaim your agency. Ignore it and you remain a predictable variable in someone else's equation. Understand this: her subconscious mind functions as an unyielding, highly efficient financial auditor. It operates on a cold, calculating ledger, perpetually assessing your fundamental assets. These are not merely superficial traits, they are the primary currencies in her biological calculation of your utility. Consider the line items on her internal balance sheet: your financial stability, your demonstrable protective capabilities, your capacity to secure her environment, your established social standing, your position within the tribal hierarchy, and yes, even your consistent provision of emotional comfort, which she interprets as a guaranteed resource. These are the critical inputs. As a male, your biological imperative is to provide. This is a foundational, hardwired drive etched into your neurobiology. It's part of the script. You are predisposed to build, to protect, to offer security. But where does this instinct for provision end and the systematic erosion of your own value begin? The critical inflection point occurs when resource provision becomes your sole identity. When your entire existence is defined by what you give, by the steady outflow of your assets, your sexual market value as an autonomous, independent male undergoes a predictable and systematic devaluation. You cease to be perceived as a partner with inherent, sovereign value. You become a utility. A utility is a means to an end, a reliable system for consistent resource extraction. This isn't born of malice, it is the cold logic of biological optimization at play. Her internal system identifies you not as an equal partner, but as an investment, a stable, predictable asset from which consistent returns are expected. Your role shifts. You are no longer a man she respects for his intrinsic value. You are a resource to be managed, an account to be drawn from. This dynamic initiates a precise and insidious resource drain on your personal sovereignty, on your emotional capital. Your perceived independence, your capacity for self-direction, is systematically eroded precisely because you have allowed your entire identity to be subsumed by your role as provider. Her respect diminishes not because you failed to provide, but because you provided so completely that you diminished yourself in the process. You became the well, and she became the consumer. The trap is insidious. It begins when you conflate your capacity for provision with the depth of her affection. You began to pour your finite resources, your time, your energy, your accumulated capital, into her comfort, into the elaborate architecture of a shared life. You believed this relentless provisioning, this constant investment, would deepen her attachment. You were mistaken. What you initiated was not a bond, but a systemic erosion. Your emotional sovereignty, your internal locus of control, began to dissipate. Your boundaries, once clear lines defining your individual space and non-negotiable standards, softened. They became permeable, then indistinct. Your independent pursuits, the very engines that fueled your masculine drive and elevated your sexual market value, withered. You stopped cultivating your own garden. You became solely focused on hers. Your identity, once a distinct and self-sustaining entity, began to merge entirely with your role as the guaranteed provider. You ceased to be a dynamic, unpredictable force. You became a predictable input, a safe bet. And in the brutal calculus of biological competition, predictability atrophies attraction. A challenge, a potential for growth or even friction, is replaced by a comfortable certainty. When your perceived value is exclusively tethered to your external provisioning capacity, you forfeit the internal resilience that defines a formidable man. You surrender the strong masculine frame, the independent will, the self-directed purpose that initially commanded her attention. That core strength, the primal magnetism, diminishes when you become solely defined by what you give rather than by who you are. You stopped being a challenge, an enigma to be solved, a goal to be pursued. You became a readily available resource, a guaranteed supply. And for the consumer, a guaranteed supply is rarely cherished. It is merely consumed until a more novel or efficient resource presents itself. You became a constant, a predictable fixture. Your resources, time, focus, financial output, ceased to be earned. They were simply available. This is the core of the resource depletion cycle. When a resource is abundant, without perceived cost, it is taken for granted. Its value approaches zero. Your efforts, your presence, your provision became an expectation, not an investment. The cost to her? Negligible. This perceived abundance is the first stage of your devaluation. When that supply diminishes, or a more efficient, higher value source appears, her biological imperative shifts. This is not malice, it is biological competition. Her disinterest, the disrespect, the ultimate detachment, these are not emotional responses. They are logical outcomes of a perceived decline in your utility. She is not abandoning a man. She is abandoning an underperforming asset. Your emotional reaction is irrelevant to her biological calculus. Understand this. This is the script. You existed as a resource, a predictable node in her consumption matrix. To reclaim any position of influence, you must cease to be merely a utility. Your path forward demands a brutal reevaluation of your internal architecture, a systemic overhaul. First, rebuild your emotional sovereignty. This is the absolute bedrock of your future control. Next, cultivate self-discipline with the ruthless precision of a biological imperative. It is the only antidote to the slow-acting poison of self-pity, which will corrode your structure from within. Your value must now be independent, untethered from external validation or provision. Invest strategically in your own sexual market value, not as a means to attract, but as a demonstration of self-ownership. This means relentless improvements across all critical domains. Optimize your physical form, secure your financial runway, and sharpen your intellectual edge. Control your primary resources, your time, your energy, your focus. Redirect them. Recognize that your singular duty is to yourself, to the optimization of your own system. The game is rigged, but only for those who don't know the rules. Stop reacting, start engineering. Self-pity is for the weak. Control is for the architect.